What's up, friends? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Today is Andre Dillard Day. So yesterday, if you missed yesterday's episode, highly recommend checking it out. If you are a Packer fan, which I'm assuming you probably are, you are going to enjoy the heck out of that episode because we got to deep dive into Xavier McKinney, all the things that he does well, a couple things he can work on, but it was a really fun episode to go over and kind of see exactly what we should expect from Xavier McKinney coming to Green Bay and being that big time impact free agent signing. Now today, we're going to be going over Andre Dillard. And while yesterday's was this really fun, really glowing, exciting review of Xavier McKinney, today's a little bit the opposite. But to be clear and to be fair, that's kind of what's expected. There's a reason that one of these free agents was the highest paid free agent safety that moved to another team. Obviously, Antoine Winfield Jr. got a little bit of a bigger deal after the franchise tag, but Xavier McKinney was the highest paid safety that moved teams, got a huge contract in Green Bay, and Green Bay aggressively went after him to be one of the centerpieces of their defense. And there's a reason why Andre Dillard was a 1-year vet minimum $0 guaranteed signing for Green Bay. So two very different ends of the free agency spectrum here. One guy, priority free agent signing on the very first day of free agency. The other guy on his third team, released off of the Titans and got nothing in guaranteed and the very minimum that they could possibly pay him. So today's going to be a little bit of a different breakdown. If you're not familiar with Dillards Story, first round pick from Philadelphia in the Rashawn Gary and Darnell Savage draft, Green Bay actually had two opportunities to draft Andre Dillard, both when they drafted, again, Gary and when they drafted Darnell Savage. And they were very smart in hindsight to not draft Andre Dillard. I was a big Andre Dillard guy in that draft. I'll just take the L on that one straight up. I thought he was going to be a potential really impressive and long-term left tackle in the NFL. I thought his pass blocking in college, while needing a few tweaks, was what was going to, or in college was what would ultimately, make him a really good tackle in the NFL. And it just has not translated that way at all. He got passed up by Jordan Mailata, who was drafted in the same draft as him. Dillard was a first rounder. Mailata was a seventh rounder. Dillard was a accomplished left tackle in college. Mailata was a rugby player who never played football before. Mailata took over for him pretty easily. Dillard had some injury issues early in his career. They tried him at guard. It didn't work. They tried him as a swing tackle. It didn't really work. Despite all of that, despite it going pretty poorly in Philadelphia, Tennessee last year gives him a huge contract to be their starting left tackle, gives him a bunch of guaranteed money. Doesn't work. He gets benched on multiple occasions. And they ultimately release him despite the fact that he has some pretty exorbitant cap hits and dead money that they're going to have to take on by releasing him. And then, like I said, Green Bay picks him up for a complete vet minimum deal with $0 guaranteed. And as you can imagine, with that sort of story, it's going to be a little bit of a different breakdown than what we had from Xavier McKinney yesterday. So let's get into it. And I think the big question that I wanted to answer going into this was it really that bad? Were some of the things that made him a first round pick displayed at times? Did he show signs that he could be at least a swing tackle, if not maybe a starting tackle? Like, what did the tape really show? And I think we probably expected, knowing that it didn't work out in Philly, that Tennessee releases him after benching him multiple times in 1 year, that the tape probably wasn't going to be great. But were there things that you could take away and reasons that you could understand why Green Bay would maybe want to pick him up and give him a flyer? And remember, Andre Dillard, in these OTAs and mini camps, was a pretty prominent member of the first team offensive line. And Ben Braden was somebody that was an offensive lineman for the Packers. You may or may not remember him. If you don't, I certainly will not be offended by it. He got some of these starts in mini camps and OTAs, and everyone was like, oh my goodness, like Ben Braden could be somebody that could potentially start for this team. And he didn't even make it out of training camp. Like, they released him at the end of training camp, and then that was basically it. And you never heard from Ben Braden ever again for the Packers. So, sometimes these things in OTAs and mini camps and who starts with the ones and things like that don't really matter. But he had a pretty prominent spot. With Zach Tom being out, he actually got some of the starts at right tackle. And they moved him around to left tackle, right tackle. And he was one of the few guys that actually got time with the ones, whereas everyone else kind of got time with the twos and the threes down on the other end of the field. So I wanted to, again, go back and watch every single snap and see, what did it look like? Were there redeeming qualities? So let's start with the grade. Again, if you're not familiar with the grading system or anything like that, it's not a big deal. We don't have to go into huge detail here. If you want to check out any of the grades or how the grading scale works, it's all over. You can check any of my Grading the Pack articles on packerreport.com. So you can check that out. Yesterday, we talked about Xavier McKinney, massive grade, plus 9.50. Today, we talk about Andre Dillard, negative 6.20 grade. So here was his grades week by week. Week 1, negative 0.7. Week 2, neutral grade, even 0.00. Week 3, negative 1.2. Week 4, plus 0.05. Week 5, negative 1.3. Week 6, negative 0.6. Week 8, plus 0.4. Week 9, negative 0.1. Week 10, negative 1.3. Week 16, after he got benched for a while, plus 0.5. Week 17, negative 1.2. And week 18, plus 0.15. In his time in Tennessee, he played 562 total snaps. All of them were at left tackle. Did not play right tackle, did not kick into guard at any point. He was just left tackle for them. The negative 6.20 grade would have been my worst grade of any Green Bay Packer in 2023. He would have been my lowest graded player, assuming that he played those 562 snaps in Green Bay at left tackle and played him the exact same way, and I graded him the exact same way. That negative 6.2 would have been my lowest grade of anyone on the team last year. And clearly, obviously, should go without saying, would have been my worst grade of any of the Packers' offensive linemen. Now, for comparison's sake, John Runyon Jr. did have a negative 4.95 grade. Josh Myers was a negative 4.7. Royce Newman was a negative 3.3. Yosh Nijman was a negative 2.55. So there were some negative grades on the offensive line. Zach Tom was fantastic, as you can imagine. Elton Jenkins had a really good grade, but there were some negative grades. John Runyon Jr. and Josh Myers kind of leading the way there, but Dillard's negative 6.20 would have put him below any of those players. And if you're thinking, can he just be a Yosh Nijman? Again, Yosh, negative 2.55 grade, although unless on fewer snaps, I should say. Dillard, negative 6.20. I will point out here, Royce Newman did have a worse grade on a per play basis. So if you are grading it per play, Royce Newman was worse than Andre Dillard. So he would, if they played the same amount of snaps and graded the same as they did in their other snaps, Newman would have been the worst graded Packer. So basically, if you kind of want to look at it this way, Andre Dillard graded as the offensive tackle version of Royce Newman, which is not what you usually want to hear in any capacity. In fact, he was one of my lowest graded offensive line grades that I have ever given. He was in the conversation at least. Remember, negative 6.20. As I mentioned on the Xavier McKinney episode, in 2017 through 2020, my grading scale was a slightly different, same concept, same overall, but I used higher numbers, meaning there was more opportunity for bigger negative grades and higher positive grades. It was kind of here more, and now it's just kind of contracted a little bit. So you could get some players who maybe have a bit more of a higher or a lower negative grade, I guess, if you will, in large part maybe just due to some of the grading being a little bit different. But either way, again, Dillard, negative 6.20. Royce Newman in 2022 had a negative 5.80 grade. Lucas Patrick in 2021 had a negative 5.15. Billy Turner in 2019 had a negative 5.85. Alex Light in very few opportunities had a negative 5.20 grade in 2019. Justin McCray had a negative 6.90 grade in 2018. Byron Bell, negative 13.5 grade in 2018. Jason Spriggs, a negative 5.7 in 2018. Jason Spriggs, a negative 13.1 in 2017. And Justin McCray, a negative 14.9 in 2017. So just to kind of give you the idea of the company that he is keeping, the worst graded offensive lineman in my time grading the Packers, if you put Dillard in that conversation, he's in the conversation with Royce Newman, Lucas Patrick, Billy Turner, Alex Light, Justin McCray, Byron Bell, and Jason Spriggs. That is the company he is keeping with that type of grade at negative 6.20. In addition, his negative 1.30 grade that he had in week 10 last year, actually, he had it in week 10 and he had it in week 5. Same negative 1.30 grade would have been the 5th lowest grade of any player on offense a season ago. And again, he did that twice. my his negative 1.20 grade would have tied him with John Runyan Jr. for 5th worst on offense, and he had a negative 1.20 grade twice. So he had 4 games that would have ranked in the bottom 5 of any offensive player in any game from a season ago. He had 7 games that were graded in the negative, 3 that were graded in the positive, and 2 that were basically neutral, a 0.0 game and a plus 0.05 game. So 2 basically neutral, 3 in the positive, 7 that graded in the negative. PFF was slightly more kind to Andre Dillard than I was. They gave him a 51.0 grade. Remember, 60 is like kind of their average grade. So his wasn't that far down with a 51.0. To kind of give you an idea for the Packers offensive line and where they graded from a PFF standpoint, Sean Rhyan had a 49.3, Royce Newman had a 40.9, Josh Myers had a 54.7, John Runyan Jr. a 56.5, and Yosh Nijman a 57.4. So he would have graded below, for PFF, below Yosh, John Runyan Jr., and Myers, slightly ahead of Sean Rhyan and ahead of Royce Newman. He had a 47.4 pass block grade per PFF. The only Packer that he would have been ahead of on their offensive line last year was Sean Rhyan. Again, that is per PFF. All right, grades aside, what are some of the things that I learned from watching Andre Dillard from every snap last season? Number one, his biggest issue by far and away was just lapses in concentration and a complete lack of consistency. There would be times where he would go the wrong direction. Now, granted, it only happened 1 or 2 times, but that he would go in the wrong direction on a play. There would be times that he was laid out of his stance. He will at times get out of his stance a little bit too early. There were times where like he just didn't seem prepared to take on the defender that was across from him. There would be times where he would kind of go through a stretch of plays and be like, all right, this is starting to look pretty good. And then it would just be, a handful of plays that was the exact opposite. And there was no consistency whatsoever. Not play by play, not week by week, not quarter by quarter, none of it. You had no idea what Andre Dillard you were going to get in any given play. He could have gone out and had a nice rep, or he could just go out and get absolutely annihilated within the first 1.2 seconds of the play. It was just a complete lack of consistency. It reminded me, quite frankly, I mentioned his name earlier, of Jason Spriggs, where you saw with Jason Spriggs, he had the athleticism. That was never a question. He had the size, the speed, the strength. He had the tools. But man, he could never put it together, and it would be the exact same thing. It'd be concentration, lapses in what he was trying to do. Like he just looked kind of confused and lost out there at times. And you see that exact same thing with Andre Dillard. Number 2, is a big one too. He gets beat far too early and far too easily, far too often. Like when he loses, it's not like a slow burn. When he loses, he gets nuked. It is just boom and it's done. It's sack on your quarterback. It's pretty stunning to watch. Like, and again, you will see plays where he's like, all right, that looks good pass pro. That looks good pass pro. Oh my God. Like the quarterback's annihilated. And it's just, again, it's an immediate loss. And those are the just absolute killers because there's nothing the quarterback can do. Like by the time he reacts to it, he's already done. He's in the ground. So there were far too many situations and scenarios where he's just beat with immediacy. And again, there's no countering that. It's just all of a sudden your left tackle, your blindside offensive tackle is beat fast and you are just screwed. There's no check and balance in place for that unless, again, you have help, but we'll kind of talk about that in a second as well. But it's far too often. It is far, far, far too often that he just gets completely nuked at the line of scrimmage. It's an easy sack or an easy tackle for loss behind the scrimmage, and the quarterback and running back are just completely screwed on the play. Number 3, he gets out-muscled and bull rushed far too easily, and he needs to find a way to anchor better. Like this is really kind of the crux of the problem is I don't know if he needs to put on a little bit more weight in the lower half or just figure out how to anchor better, get his feet underneath him, stay more balanced. I don't know what it is, but like you can just go through his face. Like you can go right through his chest, push him right back into the quarterback. But there's a variety of ways to beat him. You'll see people beat him with speed. You'll see people beat him with power. But when he gets bull rushed, when he gets power moved in any way, he just does not have that anchor to just sit down and to stop the bull rush. And there are times where you will see him kind of get that anchor, but what happens is he's already sort of in the quarterback's lap. So the quarterback's feeling it at that point, even though Dillard will at times stay in between the defender and the quarterback. It's like it's in a very tight space, meaning the quarterback's like all of a sudden he's in his little bubble, he's in his pocket. And like now Dillard's like right up next to him. And like, yeah, Dillard kind of anchored at the end to make sure that the defensive end couldn't actually bring down the quarterback. But trust me, the quarterback feels that. And now he's panicky in the pocket because Andre Dillard and a defender are deciding to dance right next to him. And that's not what you want either. And that's like a best case scenario in those situations. So you know, the quarterback definitely feels that too. And he's got to find a way to anchor better sooner so that doesn't happen. I did think there are some positives here. I did think he did a pretty good job. in double team blocks. You would be shocked at watching double team blocks in the NFL. You would think, right? You would think you've got two 300 plus pound offensive linemen that are going against one 300 pound defensive tackle, and all they have to do is move him. And you would think that this would be a pretty, like you get 2-on-1. It's just like math. It's just physics. Like you would feel like they're easily going to move him away, but you'd be surprised at how many times you get a double team block on a defensive tackle. I know they're paid to just root themselves in the ground and stay balanced and play with leverage and get underneath and all those fun things. I get it. There's some really talented players playing defensive tackle, but you'd be surprised at how few players are really good at executing in some of those double team blocks. But I thought actually Dillard did a pretty nice job of it overall and actually going pretty aggressively towards those players and trying to get them off their spot. So I was actually pretty impressed by that. As you would expect as a first round pick and with the athleticism that he possesses, he's a clean mover. He can easily get outside on those pitch plays, the pin pulls, and he can easily get to the second level. So wherever you need to get him to, whatever landmark he needs to hit, he will hit it. Now, how he finishes those plays at time to time is inconsistent, but he can get anywhere you need him to. And when Matt LaFleur mentions that he's a perfect scheme fit, all the pin pull stuff they do and all the stuff getting to the second level, he can fit and do all of that as a run blocker. And that's an advantage that he definitely has. And those are things that, again, Green Bay looks for when they are looking for offensive linemen. He was also really, really good at cut blocks. It's another thing that it's kind of like bunting in baseball where you get these guys and like they just want to do the normal thing and you ask them to do something a little bit more specialized and they're maybe not as good at it. Dillard, multiple great cut blocks on tape. So there's a couple times he'll miss here or there, but really overall, if he's asked to cut block, he's going to get that guy to the ground or at least get him tied up where they can't do anything. So that was something I don't want to know if I want to say excelled at, but he was really good at it. He also showed the ability to get low in red zone and short yardage situations. Like the low man wins in those situations. He would get low and he would do a really nice job of creating some space and creating an opportunity for the running back to hit that crease or to kind of go over the top. So that was something I was not expecting. This is more of a finesse player coming out of college that I expected the pass pro to be great and some of the run blocking stuff to be more brutal. And it's kind of been the opposite. Let's see, what else do we got here? Struggle with blitz pickups, twists, and stunts. So many freaking times. Like there were teams that would literally just twist and stunt him to death. And it wasn't just him. It was some of the other Titans offensive linemen as well. He played next to Peter Skoronski a lot, but overall, like, man, they just got annihilated, and Dillard got annihilated on twists and stunts and blitzes. Like, it would just be, he would go left and they would go right. He would go right, they would go left, and he was just lost on those plays. And again, to the point where teams would just spam it against him because they struggle with it so much on that left side of the offensive line. He cannot really rely on him on his own. That's the next one. He needs help. Like, what I always talk about as a next man up offensive lineman is, do you have to change your offense? Do you have to now keep an extra tight end in to chip? Do you need to keep a running back in to chip? Or do you need to give him help in some capacity? And the answer with Dillard, at least last year, was yes. Like if it's a big game, you're going wild card, divisional round, whatever it might be, and Andre Dillard's in that tackle, it's not like Yosh Nijman got to the point where you pretty much trust him. Was it always perfect? No, not at all. But you trusted him that the majority of the day you could get by and you could still run your offense without having to give him a significant amount of help. But with Dillard, I would not feel comfortable doing that. I would want to help him a lot, especially in pass pro. Run blocking, I think you can get away with a little bit more, but pass pro, he is going to need some help, and you're not going to just put him out there and set it and forget it and trust it. You're going to have to be cognizant of who he's going against and when he needs help on pretty much every single down, no matter what the situation is. The run blocking, number 10, not too bad. I was actually, I don't want to say impressed here, but he was a serviceable run blocker. He was a serviceable run blocker. And again, opposite of what I expected coming out of college. I thought he was going to be great in pass pro and struggle more in run blocking, but he's okay. He's okay as a run blocker. Pass pro is where he gets himself into a lot more trouble. He will try to time up the snap count. So this is a positive and a negative. He tries to do that where like right before the snap, he kind of gets out of his stance and it doesn't really get called. So he has that going for him, but there were definitely times where it should have been called. So he times it up pretty well, and that's a positive, which gets him out of his stance better and gives him a better opportunity to get out there on some of those really fast defensive linemen and just hit his landmark and hit his spot more. But it definitely looked on multiple times where he actually had a false start, and that could definitely be something that gets called down the line. Last but not least, maybe this isn't fair because Myles Garrett will be a matchup nightmare for pretty much everyone, but there's tape of Myles Garrett versus Andre Dillard, and Myles Garrett it's no chance. Just absolutely no chance. Like Myles Garrett just went through him every single time. I mean, there's probably 3 or 4, big plays by Myles Garrett in that game. And there were some other big time defensive ends as well that Dillard went against, and he just can't hang with those guys. So can you get away? Who did they play later in the season? I forget who it was, but they played a team later in the season who just did not have any real legitimate pass rush threat. And he did fine for the most part. Wasn't a big issue. But you get anyone that's got any sort of pass rush tools at their disposal, and they're just going to have an absolute field day. And the matchup with Myles Garrett was completely laughable, and Garrett just completely owned him anytime he went across from Andre Dillard. Here's the thing, though. You might be thinking this and be like, why in the heck did Green Bay sign this guy? I actually still think the signing was pretty darn sound. You have a former first-round pick. There is certainly some athletic talent there. He is a scheme fit based on his how he plays. I'm not saying good. I'm saying you don't want awful players, obviously, but again, he fits within the system. His ability to get to the second level. Green Bay likes their athletes. He does fit with what they usually want on their offensive line. There's zero downside here. Absolutely zero downside, unless they keep him and play him and he's terrible. That's a downside. But bringing him to training camp, he's a former first round pick. The talent's there. And this is kind of his last chance. It didn't work in Philly as a first round pick. It didn't work in Tennessee as a huge free agent signing. And now he gets nothing. He gets a base salary, one year deal, vet minimum, no guarantees. He's got to earn it now. And maybe that's exactly what he needs. But I still think there's very minimal downside here for Green Bay, at least at this point. I'm not sure I totally understand the starting reps and OTAs and mini camps. Like I said, you don't want to pay too much attention to it, but it was a little bit interesting. And I'm not sure that that's what I would have done with Dillard, but we'll see what happens in training camp. I would think that the Packers really would not want Andre Dillard on the field as much as possible. This is more of a maybe number 9th or 10th guy on your offensive line. And it's more of a break glass in case of emergency. And if you get him in that sort of role, I think he can be fine. Again, as your 8th or 9th guy, I think that's fine. But if he has to be your 6th or 7th guy, or if he has to become a starter, then you start feeling a lot more of I'm not so sure that this is the guy that you want out there and any legitimate playing time whatsoever. I do think he has a legitimate chance to make the team. I do think there's going to be a ton of competition along the offensive line as a whole. And like I said, I think the other big thing here is this is probably Andre Dillard's last stand. If he doesn't make it in Green Bay, I don't know that he gets another shot. Maybe some team gives him one more opportunity. Maybe makes a practice squad somewhere and maybe figures something out. But man, if you don't make it in Philly, you don't make it in Tennessee, now you don't make it in Green Bay, it's not great, right? Your career, you can see where your career is going, and it's not going the way that you want it to. So this is his last opportunity to kind of make a name for himself. And to be fair too, if he goes out and has a great season in Green Bay, he's going to get a good contract from somebody. And sometimes we will see late developers along the offensive line, and it just happens that way. So while the grade's not great, while the takeaway's not great, I still kind of like the signing for Green Bay. And let's just see what he can do in training camp and preseason. And if it continues to be an issue, all the things that we talked about today, all right, then move on. But I do think there's still a little bit of upside there that's maybe hopefully hidden underneath. And hopefully he just finds his way in Green Bay and it's a perfect mesh. Devondre Campbell was a player. Rasul Douglas. Well, Douglas is probably even a better example of a guy who just never put it together. He was, I think, a 3rd round pick. And Green Bay gives him an opportunity, calls him up off of a practice squad in Arizona, and he's fantastic. And he probably knew too. He was running out of chances. He probably knew that this is kind of his last lifeline. And he got opportunity, made the most of it, and the rest was history with Rasul. And then they, of course, trade him away. But this could be hopefully the same case for Andre Dillard, where maybe it's the 3rd time's a charm, 3rd team is a charm, and he gets the opportunity to go out at some point and he just crushes it. That'd be great. But if not, they probably need to release him at the end of camp, which is totally within reason. They would owe him 0 money, 0 dead cap hits, and you go in a different direction. But if he shows that he's still got some upside there, then maybe keep him around, see what he can do. And hopefully you don't have to play him a ton. But again, even if you do, he is somebody that has played a decent amount of snaps in the NFL, but also doesn't have a ton of wear and tear. So there are some positives there for Dillard as well. That's going to do it for me today. As I mentioned, Xavier McKinney's deep dive breakdown was yesterday. Today is Dillard. Josh Jacobs will probably be next week, maybe the week after, depending on when I can get to breaking down every single play for Josh Jacobs, but I will get to it sometime in the next couple weeks. That's going to do it for me. Shout out to Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Shea Dad, Brandon Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Bremen, Dan Miller, Alex Huang, Arnaldo Espinoza, and Dan Guest for being All Pro and Hall of Fame Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube members. Make sure to check out those memberships. Subscribe, like, comment, give those 5-star reviews. I'll see you guys tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.